You're listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks, your source for centered and focused play therapy coaching.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brenna Hicks, the Kid Counselor. This is the Play Therapy Podcast, where you get a masterclass in child-centered play therapy and practical support and application for your work with children and their families. In today's episode, I am answering a question from Alyssa in California. Hello, Alyssa. Hello to all of my West Coast friends. We have gone to 3 baseball stadiums in California. So that's about the extent of my knowledge of Cali. But actually, my best friend from college lived there. I surfed in Dana Point with her and rock climbed in Dana Point. So those are my experiences in Cali. But glad to have you writing in, Alyssa. Thank you for the email. And her question is about starting with a child dealing with separation anxiety and bringing the mom into the play session and then working back out of that. And then second question is going into play sessions, what should there be in a play therapist's mind? So I appreciate the question. We'll read through some of the email together and then we'll process. Hi, Brenna. I'm a therapist in training working with children at my site. I'm doing my best to utilize CCPT in the playroom. Question number 1. I began therapy with bringing the parent for the first sessions. The child has separation anxiety and she's 6. We've had a couple sessions with mom in the room and one with just her and I. How can I start the process of it being just the 2 of us? I was reading your transcript for an episode and it said I explain how to manage these moments by acknowledging the child's feelings, setting the limit that the playroom is just for the child and therapist, and offering choices that help the child feel more in control of the situation. I was thinking of telling the child that after 2 more sessions, we would begin just having sessions with the 2 of us or something like that. What options do I give? And then the second question, should I come to play sessions with activities in mind? I'm the type to usually have a plan. Oh, you're going to throw that out the window, Alyssa. So some of this is unfamiliar. Should I come into session with a few activities in mind and the child chooses from those? What do you think? What if there's something specific that needs attention? I hope this makes sense. Okay, so let's do one and then the other. First, there are actually quite a few therapists that have reached out that said that they've started out with the parent coming back or the parent being in the session. I actually did a discovery call a while back with a therapist who protocol at her place of employment is the parent is present the whole time for every session. And I actually ended up speaking to her supervisor and I tried to kind of share some insight as to why in CCPT that's not advised. And she really bucked me hard and said that every place she's ever worked for 20 years, the parent has always been included in the entire session. And I'm sitting there going, how are you preserving confidentiality then? You either have to say that it's not therapy, it's parent coaching, or it's family hangout, or it's something. So if you want to call it something else, but you cannot call it therapy if the parent is in the room every single session because there's no preservation of confidentiality. So anyway, I was off on a tangent there, but I know a lot of therapists that have said that they've brought parents in and then they're not really sure how to backpedal their way out of that. So if the expectation is set from the very beginning that the playroom is just for the therapist and child, obviously that's an ideal scenario. So when you set that expectation from the beginning, even with a child with separation anxiety, the child will eventually come back. So you may have sessions where the child is unwilling or unable to go back to the playroom at the start, but the child will eventually choose to go back. And then the parent has never been a part of the process. But if at some point the parent has already been included, the most effective way to handle that, Alyssa, is exactly what you said. So you provide expectations and you basically set a limit with enforcement choices. So I actually think it's a very helpful plan to say after 2 more sessions, we would just have the 2 of us. However, the fact that she's already done 1 session with just the 2 of you, I don't know that you have to wait 2 sessions. So if you were actively still bringing mom or dad in every single session, I think it would be helpful to prepare in 2 more. It's just going to be the 2 of us because that gives the child the opportunity to acclimate to the idea. However, you mentioned that she's come in with you, just the 2 of you. So at that point, I would say you probably could just jump to moving forward. We're not having any more sessions with mom. But if you're going to go through the process, you would say something like, I know in the past, sometimes mom has come in, but the playroom is just for you and me. And then this is where we pivot to the choices. So the goal is that the choices make it clear that the child has control, but it is not about the parent being in the room. In other words, the choices are not about the parent at all. The choices are about other things over which the child does have control. So for example, you might say, you can choose to run back to the playroom with me, or you can choose to skip back to the playroom with me. Which do you choose? Notice now the choices are, how are we getting to the playroom versus whether or not mom is coming back. Or you can choose to have mom come in and see what we've been doing at the 2-minute warning, or you can choose to have mom come and see what we did at the end of our session when our time is up. Which do you choose? Now it's, when is mom going to come back after the session is already over? Another option would be, you can choose to have mom sit in this chair and wait for you, or you can choose to have mom sit in this chair and wait for you. Which do you choose? Notice that in every scenario, there is empowerment. There is giving the child a measure of control, but the choices are actually about other things not related to the parent being in the room. And the fact that she's already gone back with you, I don't think this is going to be a big power struggle for her. I think she already feels more comfortable, and the separation anxiety is probably not so alarming to her with you at this point. I'm not saying she still doesn't have separation anxiety, but I think you've proven, going back to the playroom with her, that she can trust you and that the playroom is safe and the relationship is there. So that's the way that I would handle that. But keep in mind, for all of you that are struggling to kind of get your way out of the parent has been in the room, it's about setting clear expectations. It's about warning the child ahead of time. And it's about enforcing those choices, because I've had a lot of therapists email me and reach out to me and say, the child started uncontrollably screaming and crying, and I felt like I was torturing the kid, and I thought it was traumatic, and I thought that I had to let the mom and dad come into the room. You don't. You reassure and you reflect and you validate and you acknowledge and you continue to return responsibility and you continue to remind them of the limit. They have separation anxiety because they have used a parent as a crutch to help them regulate their emotions. So yeah, are their emotions going to get big sometimes? Absolutely. But you reassure and you validate and you reflect the feeling, and you continue to remind them, as soon as our playtime is over, you get to go see mom again. And it helps them realize that they do not need to have their parent present. Now, we never force a child to come back to the playroom. I want to make that really clear. But if the child chooses to come back and then immediately says, I want to go see mom, that's where a limit is set, because our playtime isn't up yet, and our playtime is for having in the playroom, and the playroom is just for you and me. The child can regulate and comply within those boundaries, but we have to be very clear on them, and we can't waver on them once they've been established. Okay, so hope that's helpful. Now let's move on to question 2. Should I come to a session with play activities in mind? Hard no. Said lovingly and gently. All right. I'm usually the type to have a plan, so some of this is unfamiliar. Alyssa, welcome to the Recovered Control Freak group. I suppose some of us were never control freaks, and that's why we loved CCPT, but I am a recovered control freak. My husband tells me that I want control in almost every arena of my life, except with kids, which is really bizarre. I guess I've learned how to manage that. Here's the thing, Alyssa. You don't ever come into session with activities in mind. The child-centered playroom is the child chooses. It's child-led. So the playroom is full of choices. Everything in the playroom is a choice. Everything in the playroom is an activity. So we do not need to come with anything planned, anything on the agenda, anything in mind, because our prompt to the child is, you can play with all the toys in most of the ways that you'd like. And then the child chooses the activity. The child chooses what they play. We do not have to have anything scripted. So your final question, what if there's something specific that may need attention? The child knows what that specific thing is, and they know they need to address it, and they will, given the time, the tools, and the opportunity. So I actually started, I think I've shared this story before, but it's relevant here too. I started my Florida Association for Play Therapy training. It was basically a seminal course in CCPT. And I started the whole thing with, if you are a control freak, you are probably not well suited for CCPT unless you can curb it. So be mindful that the fact that you like to have a plan for things, that works in lots of arenas of your life, I'm sure. But the CCPT way and the child-centered playroom is that we trust that the child knows, we trust that the child will do the work, and we do not have to have an agenda. And this flies in the face of managed care. It flies in the face of EHR. It flies in the face of SOAP notes. It flies in the face of SMART goals. It flies in the face of documentation for reimbursement because they think that you're supposed to, quote, do something. Well, let's circle back. My vets are going to know this. If you're new, I might blow the lid off your mind right now. We don't do CCPT. Therefore, we don't have to have an activity. We don't have to have a plan. We don't have to have an agenda or curriculum or intention or anything. We need to know the child's name and the child's name only. We don't even need backstory. That's really going to blow people's minds. Talk to a directive play therapist and say, I don't even need to do any intake. All I need is the child's name. What? You're crazy. You need biopsychosocial. You need history. You need this. You need that. You need reports from mom. No, you don't. You need the child's name. You don't go in with anything because it's not that we're doing CCPT. We are CCPT. It's just that simple. It is a way of being. So you go into the playroom with the child's name. You get out of the way and you let the child do what the child knows that they need to do. It's that simple. It is very, very complex and it requires so much, but it is just that simple. So Alyssa, thank you so much for the questions. I hope that was helpful. I hope it was helpful for all of you. If you all want to have me answer a question, please email me, Brenna@thekidcounselor.com. You can also leave a message in the States on the voicemail line, 813-812-5525. I love y'all. We'll talk again soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks. For more episodes and resources, please go to www.playtherapypodcast.com.